Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Revolution Recap. We are 1 week away from the 2021 MLS season opener, and the Revolution's preseason is wrapping up out in California. As we do every year, we are here to wrap up the preseason, give our thoughts about the team heading into the season, and we are going to give some bold predictions on what you can expect from the team in 2021. I'm Greg Johnstone. Joining me today from the Bent Musket, the founder of the announced John Bell movement, it's Seth McComber. Seth, it's been a while. Great to have you back on. How are you doing?
So happy to be here. I'm more of a Twitter Spaces guy now, but I am happy to jump on to this more old school technology, the podcast. Very happy to be here with you and Chris, of course, to talk a little bit about the New England Revolution and John Bell.
And John Bell, of course. And by the way, if you have not read it already, make sure you check out Seth McComber's article on John Bell, which was published last week at the Bent Musket. It is a must-read for all of you listeners who cannot get enough John Bell content. So please make sure you check that out. Also joining me today, Chris Valukas. Chris, how are you doing today?
Doing fantastic, thanks. With no soccer since December 6th. And so now we're, as of recording, we're 8 days out from the first meaningful match since then. So, yeah, I'm pretty stoked.
And we're 1 day out from the first Any Revs 2 game. Their season opener is tomorrow, I believe. So that's why we're getting it done tonight, so I can watch that game tomorrow. Hopefully you're listening to this Saturday morning. If not, we already know the result on that game. But anyway, regardless, before we get into kind of the preseason takeaways and bold predictions, I wanted to get Seth's takes on this offseason's acquisitions. This is the first time we've talked to him since last season. So Seth, I want to hear kind of your overall grade for the Revolution. Give them a grade on how they did this offseason. And was there anything else you expected the Revs to do or you wanted them to do?
I mean, on paper, it looks like they did a lot of the things they were supposed to do. Now that we've seen a few preseason games, whether we actually watch them live or we try to follow along on whatever coverage was offered on Twitter, it's hard to know, right? I mean, we didn't really see much of Mafla. The highlights of Mafla so far was getting megged against LAFC late in the game and then making a big stop during a 60-minute scrimmage. So it's hard to know exactly what to expect from him. I'm a little bit hopeful because he's a guy that was once coached by Osorio, who's obviously someone who played in MLS. So you imagine that, Osorio ranked him quite highly for his versatility, for his speed. Those are things that you want from an attacking left back. So on paper, he looks pretty decent. Captoon, we have not seen anything of Captoon so far. Again, someone who looked good on paper. One of the things I liked from the highlights I was seeing from him is his ability to hit the diagonal ball. So his ability to, not only be a guy who can make a tackle, but also distribute the ball, and especially for the Revolution, who like to tuck some of those midfielders inside, like Carlos Heel, and get those outside backs forward. Someone that can hit a diagonal ball is really effective and really important because, with Brandon Bye on the right-hand side, I'll talk about him because we've seen more of him. He really likes to hit that early ball in, so that means he needs a little bit of space to be able to do something like that. So Captoon, on paper, looks pretty good. Obviously for Traustason, we haven't seen him because he's been on international duty. Again, another player that highly recommended by Bruce Arena said he was the best fit, that they looked at multiple people and he was the best player. Even maybe mentioning that he was a little bit more of a guy who can come inside and play make a little bit, which is kind of exciting because you have those outside backs that like to get forward. He's had an assist against Liechtenstein, who's no Luxembourg, but obviously certainly is a European team. So to get an assist is exciting. On paper, it looks really good. And to kind of just think about the roster construction as a whole, I think what's most exciting is that there's depth. And you've heard, I remember back in the Jay Heaps years, you heard about there's competition at every spot. There wasn't. Like the guys who kind of would compete, they're around for a couple of years. They weren't necessarily guys who were ready to start. So if Traustason's not ready, who we have right now? We have Buchanan. And a lot of people are very high on Buchanan to step in. If Captoon's not ready to go, then, we have Casado coming back. We have Maciel, who's earned a lot of praise during this preseason. Obviously, we have Polster there. I mean, Scott Caldwell is still a name that exists. So there are options there. If left back, it's not Mafla. I'd be surprised if it's DeJuan Jones for the entire season. I mean, it's really hard to be attacking left back if you're not left-footed. But he has shown pretty well this preseason. He's been quite good this preseason. So I think what's exciting, and even in the center back position, which is probably like the place they lack the most depth, I would have loved for them to get an experienced guy. I think De La Garza is good. I've actually been pretty happy with De La Garza this preseason, showing that he still has some gas left in the tank. So you have him, and then I mean, John Bell is in all serious. I know that there's obviously some humor that comes along with John Bell, but he's shown really well this preseason, and I would argue that he is not a drop off from Delamea, who made mistakes regularly, and Mancien, who again kind of made mistakes regularly. I mean, John Bell's a young player who's left-footed, who can play center back with speed. And I don't know if you saw some of the highlights, but the guy has ups. Like, he's the guy who can win headers. So I think that, I don't know, you can give him a B plus and A minus. I mean, it's hard to fully grade because we haven't seen the players play. But I mean, there's lots of depth here. And I think also there's the last kind of hope here that if it's not good enough, that Bruce Arena will add someone in midseason. He's even hinted that already.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I think I said it in a previous podcast, that the Revolution are in a position where they can add on another player, maybe not a designated player, but kind of like what we saw last year with Matt Polster and Tommy McNamara and Lee Wynn. They were very active in the summer window. I don't see any reason why they can't be active in the summer window. They have at least 2 senior roster spots, probably 3 senior roster spots, and some allocation money left over. So they probably will be adding on in the summer as the year goes on. And yeah, it's very excited to get excited about the depth. Really, center back is the only issue that I kind of see. But as you said, if John Bell or Colin Verfruth, who was signed last year, if one of them turn out to be a pretty solid player, you just need someone to kind of back up, to kind of replace Tony Delamea, because I don't think Mancien is really someone that, is tough to fill his shoes. So, if someone is a solid third center back, whether it's De La Garza or John Bell or Verfruth, this is a really, really solid team. So, Seth, give me your prediction right now. Where do the Revs finish in the Eastern Conference?
I mean, these are always hard to say. I'll go third in the Eastern Conference. I think that's a safe bet. I think that when I think about it, a Bruce Arena team isn't necessarily built to win the Supporters Shield, because he understands that you have to get your best soccer going during the off season. So I think that you'll see him get his team together, get them working hard, give them rest when they need to have rest, and the goal is just to get things going during the postseason. And I remember talking to you, Greg, last year after Carlos Gil's injury, and asking this question of how concerned are we about Carlos Gil? How concerned are we about his injury? And I remember saying I'm not that concerned, because as long as he comes back at some point this season, they're going to be okay. And we saw that happen. The Revs weren't very good for most of the season. I remember even coming back and being this team is not very good. And in the end, they snuck into the playoffs. They wouldn't have made a playoffs correct in a normal year, because they snuck in on the expanded playoffs. And then they did really well. I mean, they could have gone to MLS Cup. They could have won MLS Cup. So I think that, you look at a Columbus Crew, you look at Atlanta United. I mean, there's some teams out there that seem pretty good. And I think that third seems like a good expectation. This is a pretty solid team with Matt Turner, Carlos Gil, Gustavo Bo, some good game-winning players. I think that third is a reasonable expectation, but I'd look more towards making the playoffs and then seeing what happens in the postseason.
Yeah, and there'll certainly be a lot of strengthened East teams, not on top of the teams you listed. Can't forget about Inter Miami, who has 4 DPs. I mean, they're just completely breaking all the rules just to dominate MLS. So let's move on to preseason. And as you kind of alluded to, Seth, we've seen kind of some limited clips. We've only seen 2 preseason games and kind of some highlight packages and stuff like that. But Chris, I'm going to go to you first. What is your key takeaway from what you've seen in preseason so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been limited minutes, like you were saying. But basically what I'm seeing is we still have a lot of work to do as far as chemistry goes. It still looks a little bit like last year there was a bit of a disconnect with the offense, but it is preseason, and that's what that's for. A lot of young guys have been stepping up, and Seth mentioned it before too. John Bell and Maciel, in particular, those guys. There was also Connor Presley, who has been a bit up and down for me in the preseason. I believe he went back to play with the Revs too for tomorrow's match, but Connor Presley actually, he really impressed being able to cross the ball in the way that he was from that whenever he was making attacking runs. So he definitely gets a nod from me. But then, Maciel showing that he's comfortable and ready to compete with the best that MLS has to offer. I mean, on paper, I guess, right, with Chicharito up there, he didn't really miss a beat. And up against the LA defense as well, he performed really well, and he just looked comfortable and natural out there.
Yeah, Maciel is certainly one of the big positives in this preseason. I think his stock is rising a ton in the first season. Before we get to a listener question on Maciel, I want to go to you, Seth. Do you have any key takeaways from this preseason that we haven't touched on yet?
Yeah, I liked what Chris said about the chemistry in the offensive third. I think that one thing for me with Buxa is that he is someone who's just been slightly off during his time. It feels like he's almost there for the right run, or he almost makes the right pass. It's just been a little bit off. I saw some of that in the preseason games so far. Meanwhile, Carlos Gil and Gustavo Bo, I mean, these guys look like they've been playing their whole entire life together. Like, it's incredible to me to see a through ball to like a diagonal run that Gustavo Bo is making, and it's just like they just read each other so well. And I think there's cause for optimism where, Adam got a few goals during preseason, but even, the most recent one that he got where, the ball gets crossed in and missed Tommy McNamara, and he gets there, but it doesn't feel like the type of goal that's guaranteed to happen. Like it's labeled, I believe, on revolutionsoccer.net as his like instincts as a finisher come into play. And I guess I hope that that's the case. But when I imagined DeJuan Jones sitting in a cross and him finishing it, I imagine him making the perfect run where he like slots it in. It's like, that's just perfect. That's great timing. That's the fox in the box type of stuff that you want. So I just wonder a little bit about that. I'm optimistic because I think playing with Carlos Gil makes everyone better. I mean, I think that like Carlos Gil is just going to make everyone get goals and put themselves in good position because he also occupies so many defenders. And I also think that Buxa has good feet. We've seen him create some goals for himself. But I just still wonder like where that chemistry comes from, that he makes the perfect run to finish off that ball. And the last thing I'll say here real quick, there was a great play where he actually came back and won the ball, and it eventually gets to the right-hand side where the ball's played in early by Brandon Bai, and it gets finished by Gustavo Bo. I mean, that's really promising stuff by the big man as well. So there's promising stuff there, but I just wonder if he's the DP forward that this team needs to win MLS Cup. Like, I think he can do well enough, but I don't know if he's the MLS Cup winning forward. But we'll see.
Yeah, and this is a big year for Adam Buxa too. Year one, I think we can give him a pass with COVID and, having to kind of build that chemistry in very difficult circumstances where players had to train individually throughout the season or in small groups and, all that type of stuff. There's really not a whole lot of excuses this year. We're going into year two. The offense seems to be pretty stacked. So obviously Trostason's going to be coming in a little bit late a few weeks into the season, but all things considered, this is a really big put up or shut up year for Adam Buxa, so a lot of pressure on his shoulders. I do want to go back to Maciel for a second, and I want to go to you on this one, Seth, but Maciel, one of the big stories of preseason, we did get a question saying from Mocha on Twitter. He says, should Maciel start next to Matt Polster based on how he looks in preseason? Yes or no, do you think he should start, and what do you think his role is on the senior team?
Maybe. I think what's hard is that preseason, the game's different in preseason, right? It's about fitness. It's about getting some of that chemistry down. And I think you saw in some of like the Revolution games that we watched, like they would push numbers forward, and there wasn't necessarily that cohesion between like the defense and the midfield and the forwards. It could be a little bit end to end. And I'm thinking of one of the goals that was scored against them. It was basically a quick transition, and the opponent scored. It's just a different type of game. And I think that we can all look back at preseason games and be like, you know what? Like so-and-so did so well during the preseason. They're going to be a legit player. But the fact of the matter is different. I mean, Timmy Mulgrew, you know that name. He scored a goal during preseason at one point. And people were like, okay, like this guy could be someone. And he goes, and I think he ended up playing for the Rochester Rhinos at one point. and he doesn't end up really making a mark in the first team. I think it's a little bit different, of course, because he was a Revolution 2 player. He's pretty calm on the ball. John Bell, who obviously we have a lot of respect for, calls him an absolute player, absolute baller. So I think there's praise as him as a calming force in the middle. But is he the one to start in there versus a cap? Because I imagine Polster kind of has an inside track right now. Is he the one to start there over a Captoon? Probably on week 1, he's not going to be ready, but you imagine at some point he starts there. Casado's probably not ready week 1, but you still have like a Tommy McNamara. You still have Scott Caldwell, maybe more veteran presence in the middle. I'm all for it. I mean, I think that, he's a good player. He's a solid player. He's able to keep the ball moving. He's able to, what I really liked about him was his positioning, that he saw like the other midfielder and he's like, oh, I have to be here in order to cover or in order to block these passing lanes. So he seems like a very smart individual. I'm just not sure if he's going to be a week 1 starter, but I'm not totally against the idea.
Yeah, and I just want to take a side note here to talk about Timothy Mulgrew a little bit, just because once his name comes up, I want to throw out the knowledge. I believe he was on the 2015 USL Cup champion Rochester Rhinos, so we can't write him off as a total bust. He certainly did contribute to a winning atmosphere out there in Western New York, along with other Revolution Super Draft pick Tyler Rudy. So yeah, very good reference there on Timothy Mulgrew. Moving back to Maciel, Chris, I want to get your thoughts on Maciel and where he kind of fits on the Revs depth chart right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking week 1. I'm with Seth. I don't think he's going to be starting week 1. And if we're looking at the players that we have available, I would have to say, it's probably Tommy Mack that goes in there. Arena likes the guys that have the experience playing. And, week 1 MLS, you probably don't want to run out a very green player. I think McNamara probably fits that bill pretty well for him. Obviously, we haven't seen Captoon out there yet. And then Caicedo, as Seth mentioned too, we don't really know what his fitness level is going to be like week 1. So, week 1, I'm going Tommy Mack is probably going to be the guy. Maciel, at some point, I think he'll be, I wouldn't say a regular starter, but we will regularly see appearances from him. He wasn't brought onto the first team to take up an international spot to not play. And I think that we have seen so far from, his minutes that we've seen in the preseason, he has the ability, and I don't see any reason why he's not going to get, fairly significant minutes overall in 2021.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting is that Captoon has had limited minutes in preseason. Luis Caicedo, they seem to be easing back into the season very, very softly. I'm not totally sure if he is still having injury issues or whatnot, but it seems like those two players are kind of coming back very slowly and might not be at 100% for week 1. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Maciel make a debut in week 1 or week 2 early in the season, because they obviously central midfield, there's a lot of depth, but I'm not sure there's going to be that depth in week 1. So I don't know about starting him right away. As you said, Seth, preseason's preseason. It's a little bit more about fitness, and you're not necessarily going up against the most intense, focused competition. So I don't want to read too much into it, but it's very, very clear from what Bruce Arena says and from what we've seen that Maciel is going to have some sort of role on this team going into 2021. We did get a question from a listener who said, what do you think is Bruce's current depth chart at central midfield, and do you agree with him? He says that Bruce's depth chart for him is probably Polster, Captoon, Maciel, Caicedo, and Caldwell. I think he left off McNamara. There's a limit on Twitter, so I'll give him a break. And he says, I think I agree with that, but want to see Luis get more minutes than Polster. I kind of agree. I think his starting pair is Polster and Captoon. Then probably Tommy McNamara is your third central midfielder. And then Maciel, Caicedo, Caldwell, I really don't know where they all rank. Caicedo really has not played with under Bruce Arena a whole lot since he was hurt last year, and we don't know what his condition is going to be. I think that's a complete toss-up, but I think Polster, Captoon, and Tommy McNamara, if totally healthy, those are going to be kind of your 3 primary central midfielders, and then I think the other 3 will kind of be circling in situationally. Seth, any objections to that one?
The only thing I would add is I think Caldwell is kind of low on the depth chart for Bruce Arena, because Remember when Bruce Arena first came in, he was someone that wasn't getting a lot of opportunities. He ended up starting the playoff game, I believe, because Casado was out, and he got pulled early in that game. And we saw that a few times that, when Caldwell was given the start, he'd get pulled early. And then he did get himself back in favor as time went on. But I just think that he's a great person to have on the team. I think that he's a great locker room presence. I think he's a good option from time to time. But I just don't think that Arena imagines him playing as a midfielder on a MLS Cup winning team. I think Maciel does have a decent chance of moving himself up the depth chart because of his positioning. Casado is someone who kind of chases a little bit, and he has a lot of energy, and he was great for that high pressing system. But I do wonder, where he'll end up on the depth chart. I'm a big fan of Casado, but I do wonder where he'll end up on the depth chart. With Bruce Arena, he loves to play defense first. He loves to make sure that his teams play really tight. So he wants to make sure some of those defensive midfielders are very sound positionally. So Casado will want to make sure that he does that if he wants to get into Bruce Arena's game day 18 or starting 11.
And I think Caicedo would be a good matchup if you're having, say, Tayon Buchanan on the right as a right wing back and having Tayon push up and really trying to cause havoc on that right side. Caicedo is a person that can easily cover that space and kind of be kind of defensive minded in that kind of vein. So, Chris, any thoughts on that central midfield depth chart you want to add?
Not much. I mean, it's messy. Bruce is in what I don't know really how to word it, but it's just like it's a really complicated situation that he's really lucky to find himself in, because I don't think you can really go wrong with anyone that you're going to be rolling out. Of course, you're going to have better players than others, but I think overall we, as the Revolution, have a very solid midfield, and there's just so much depth. I mean, Seth mentioned it earlier. There's so much, at least on paper, depth too, that we'd probably need an entire ream of paper to go through all the potential. It's just it's pretty stacked there. So.
A few years ago, I think we defended and argued for a Luis Caicedo, Scott Caldwell central midfield, and now we're talking about them as if they're the fifth and sixth central midfielders on the team. So pretty exciting time. It's a good problem for Bruce Arena to have. One thing that is coming up, though, I kind of mentioned Captoom not playing, and actually there's a few other players. Mafla has been limited in preseason too, although he's made some appearances over the past couple of games. And then Traustason will not be arriving. I think he's arriving this weekend. He needs to quarantine for 7 days. And then obviously he needs to get caught up to speed with the team. So who knows if he's even going to be starting in the home opener. It might take him a few weeks to hit the ground running. Chris, I want your thoughts if there's any reason for concern specifically on Captoom, and your thoughts on the lack of minutes for the big three signings so far. That's a question from Revolution Report, by the way. Thank you for the question. But Chris, take it away.
Not so much, I guess, with Mafla. My concern is more with Captoom and what sort of player are we getting? How fragile is he? I mean, we heard that Mafla was going to be the fragile one, right? Is it Glass Legs? I think his nickname was. But Captoom is the player that we're not seeing out on the pitch, and yeah, that has me a bit concerned. Traustason, he's just finished playing in Icelandic football. I don't remember what the tournament was. That there was a World Cup qualifying, maybe. But yeah, I mean, he's getting minutes. He's fit. He was already practicing with Malmo, getting ready for their season. So I'm not concerned with Traustason whenever he comes in and gets integrated. But yeah, my concern is definitely with Captoom. And are we going to have another player that's going to be just injured all the time, where we're expecting them to be out there? I'm trying to think of the name, and it's eluding me so much right now. While being injured. Yes, Kouassi. Thank you. And that's who I'm thinking of. That's what's. I'm having Kouassi flashbacks right now, where Kouassi seemed to always be injured.
Yeah, Kouassi arrived with a torn ACL, so he's certainly one of the bigger DP busts in recent Revs memory, and I don't think it was totally his fault. I think it was just kind of bad luck on the Revs' part.
Mm-hmm.
But Seth, what about you? Any concern about Captoom or the other two signings in Mafla and Traustason for their lack of minutes in preseason?
Yeah, I mean, I am and I'm not concerned. I mean, I'm not concerned because the season is long, and like I mentioned before, as long as Bruce Arena finds his starting 11 by the end of the year, the guy does really well in the postseason. He kind of figures things out. So I'm not quite worried yet. I am worried in the sense that I view this year or next year to be the years the Revs have to win the MLS Cup. I mean, Bruce Arena is 69 years old. I imagine that he took this job with the understanding that he's trying to cement his legacy, like that he doesn't want the last memory of himself being guiding the U.S. men's national team to that loss against Trinidad and Tobago. So to come to the New England Revolution, who has been a team that constantly underperforms, that sometimes ranks very low in terms of ambition. If you all want to think about Grant Wall's ambition rankings, it was constantly the Revs towards the bottom. So he's come in, and at first he was talking about the roster not being that good, but he actually overperforms that first year after taking over with Friedel. Last year was a weird season because of COVID, because of Heel, still ends up doing pretty well. And now you have a roster that is built to win. I mean, how many more years is Matt Turner going to be here? How long is Carlos Heel going to be here? How long is Buchanan going to be here? Bo's going to get older. He's not necessarily the youngest player. Kessler might get looks from people if he continues to perform well and be that type of young, defender, center back. So, I think that you have to get those signings right. And if Mafla flops at left back, fine, DeJuan Jones takes over there. But you had Butner last year and Mafla this year. How many left backs do you sign that don't work out before it's like, well, maybe the system isn't working? And Captoon, if Captoon's brought in as a defensive midfielder and it ends up being somebody else that starts there, fair enough. But that's kind of a flop of a signing too. I don't think we're ready to call those things flops by any means. But you want your signings that come in to solidify those holes to be starters. That's kind of their purpose. And, everyone's the ratings are still out when it comes to Buxa. So that's another player that, did Bruce Arena bring in the right guy? So with Bruce Arena, he came here to win. And he has to make sure the guys he's bringing in are on the field, healthy, ready to go. So I'm not worried yet, but I think it's worth mentioning that he has to get some of those guys right in order to build that confidence, in order to win a championship this year or next year.
I don't know if I mentioned this in a few podcasts ago or if I said this off air, but if you think about the New England Revolution going into the 2023 season, it could be a completely different core. Is Matt Turner there? Like you said, is Tayon Buchanan there? Is Carlos Heel here? Is he healthy? Is Gustavo Bo here? Is he healthy? What's going on with Adam Buxa? Because I think he has 2 more options or 1 more. I think he's got a 4-year deal too. Is Buxa here? Is Traustason here? There's a lot of questions, and you're right. They're really building for a win now team. So you're not going to get many bites at the apple. You need to fill in the squad and bring in these depth pieces. And they made these signings early. They made the Mafla signing in December, and they made the Captoon signing in December. I know Traustason was a few weeks ago, but that was rumored for a few weeks and whatnot. So you need the role players or starters like Captoon, who allegedly he's a starter, and Mafla, who's going to be a starter. You need them to kind of fulfill their role and kind of do their job. And if they don't, there's going to be an issue. So I'm kind of with you. I'm not totally hitting the alarm on Captoon yet, but there is Kawasi flashbacks, and you certainly hope he fills in. Another reason too I'm not worried about Captoon too much is I just feel there's so much depth there at central midfield. And like you said, if Mopfla's another bust, I feel fine with DeJuan Jones playing left back. He played there all postseason last time, and they were perfectly fine. But as you say, Bruce needs to hit on some of these guys for us to win MLS Cup.
He set the bar pretty high by signing Bo. That's the first thing he did.
Yeah, and Bo went off on that scoring streak really early in 2019. He scored 10 goals in 12 games or whatever it was. But I don't think it was that much. I think it was 7 and 10. But anyway, regardless. Bold prediction time, guys. We did bold predictions the last 2 years. We got some good predictions from our listeners here. We'll start with Cam saying John Bell will win a starting spot by the end of the season, which Seth, you kind of alluded to a little bit earlier. I like that one. We're big John Bell guys. Go John Bell. Chris Creighton says Renix will come out of his shell to prove he deserves a spot on the team before his contract runs out. I'm not sure what his contract status is, but I think this is a big make or break year for Renix. We also got another bold prediction from quite a big Revs fan saying Renix is a bust. Well, let's go there. I don't know if you guys have a bold prediction about Justin Renix, but Seth, Justin Renix is apparently going with Revs 2 to their preseason game in Hartford and is apparently going to be starting the season with Revs 2. Do you think Justin Renix makes any sort of impact with the team this year? What's your outlook on him this year?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that Bruce Arena gave him some time late in the season, in the postseason last year. Those are big minutes to give away to kind of a guy who hasn't really proven it much. I mean, even when he was loaned out to the championship, he wasn't doing well in USL. I believe he went to North Carolina with Dave Sarakin. Yeah, so he didn't really do well there. He did do pretty well with Revs 2, which probably boosts the confidence and gives Arena some hope that he'll be a guy there. It's hard to imagine where he fits in with the Revolution first team. I mean, I think at this point you have Buxa, and then behind him is probably Bunbury as a striker. I mean, he's a guy who has amazing wheels, who will press all the time. He seems like no matter how much the haters are out there, he's going to be someone that's probably coming off the bench to be either on the wing or up top. There's been a lot of praise for Kiza as being a guy who can finish. So you have to, if you're Renix, you have to beat him out. I think that he has to do well with Revs 2 before he kind of jumps in and becomes a first team regular. And I was thinking about it, this year, it's going to be hard to make the game day 18. That's a pretty stacked 18 to kind of bust into. Even if you think about John Bell, who I'm a big fan of, and he even admits it himself. During my interview, he said that he was kind of told that he'll probably play Revs 2 minutes. That was only after the first preseason game. So obviously now he's kind of gained more confidence and he's had more reps. So maybe Bruce Arena is thinking something else at this point. But John Bell was like, if you look at this team, it's going to be hard to make the 18. You have room for a goalkeeper, 2 or 3 defenders. You have lots of attackers. So Justin Renix is going to have to beat out some people if he's even going to make the game to 18. So definitely a make or break year for him. If I'm going to push one way or the other, I'm going to say that he's more likely to be someone who's leaving Revs this year or next year, as opposed to solidifying his position with the Revs.
Yep. You're definitely getting a Nick Firmino, Isaac Anking vibe where he's kind of on the outside looking in. And this, to me, is a make or break year. I thought last year was a bit of a make or break year for him. I think if he's getting the majority of his minutes at Revs 2, that is not a really good sign for him going forward. Chris, anything to add on Renix?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the bold prediction piece of it, I mean, I think it's hard to predict that he's going to be a bust when I don't think that he's been very successful to begin with. I think, Chris Creighton has a good bold prediction on it, I guess. If you want to go something wild and out there, the fact that he's going to solidify a spot because, like Seth mentioned, there's too much depth. We have Buxa, Bunbury, and Kiza is supposed to be, the best attacker coming out of the draft, according to Bruce Arena. So he has his work cut out for him. I think he's going to be more of a USL Championship type career guy.
Yeah, and it's hard to say Buxa is going to break out of his shell, and Kiz is going to break out of his shell, and Renix is going to break out of his shell. If Buxa breaks out of his shell, I mean, I don't even know if Kiza or Renix sees the field too much. And you could say, well, Renix could play the wing, but there's so many wingers on this team. Is Renix going to play more than Emma Boateng? I don't think so. So quite a big Revs fan. Also had a bold prediction of Buxa scoring 10 goals and is sold to Europe by mid-season. He also adds Captoon being a flop at first, but then finds his footing as the season goes on. Macho says Teon scores more than Gustavo Bo, which is actually, I kind of like that prediction, and I think that's a pretty spicy take when you read it at first, but I really like that one as well. Raleigh Revs fan says Buxa with 15 goals, Teon super sub / spot starter on wing / right back, depending on opponent / situation. He says Revs finished 3rd to 5th in East. I kind of agree with all that. Hopefully we can get Buxa to 15 goals. And then Mike Kennedy says Revs finished 3rd in East behind New York City and Columbus. Win the East, upset New York City FC in the Bronx, and lose MLS Cup 2-1 to Portland. Kessler, Defender of the Year. Kiza is Rookie of the Year equivalent. So a lot of good positive things there from Mike. I want to go back to Buxa really quickly because I know a few years ago, Seth, we did the over-under on Juan Fernando Caicedo goals. Famously, I made it 5, and we went back and forth on that all season. I want to hear you give me an over-under line on Adam Buxa goals scored this season. 9.5
seems like a decent number to go with. And I would go, I actually like the prediction of 10. I think that if Carlos Gil plays the entire year, Buxa seems a guy that's healthy quite a bit. He was out there. And I think the other thing is that his teammates really like him. Somebody asked me on Twitter at some point, like, what's going on with this guy? Do the teammates like him? And they support him through and through. I asked it a few times. They're like, oh, we trust him. We believe in him. And I think even when you saw him come back to the training grounds, like they were throwing water, they were all joyous that he was back with the team. And I think that like 10 goals is not necessarily great for your starting striker. But I think it's doable. And I think that with Bo and some other pieces, that's enough to certainly get you in the playoffs and maybe even go even further. And he actually did pretty well in the playoffs last year. So, I mean, it depends on, I think 9.5 is like a decent line to put on. You could go higher, certainly, because, I mean, if I'm putting 9.5, I already say higher. Maybe you want to put it more at like a 12.5 or a 13.5 to make the choice a little bit harder. But I think 10 to me seems pretty reasonable for this guy.
Yeah, I was going to put it around 11.5, just because I'm sure you know about the expected goal stat. I think it shows that he had his chances, he just couldn't convert, and whether that's because he's bad or because of luck, we'll find out. But Teal Bunbury scored 8 times last season. I think Buxa will get more of those, some of those chances from Bunbury, because they kind of did a bit of a rotation last year. And Buxa still scored 6 goals in 1,500 minutes last year. So I'm going to be a little bit more bullish than you. I'm going to move up to 11.5 as my over-under. Chris, where do you fall on this one?
You want to go? Let's go bullish, right? Because I'm saying I'm right there with Riley Revs fans. I'd put the line at 15. We got 37 games, and if he could score every other game, that would put him right at about the 15. Actually, over 15 actually. But I think his preseason's gone really well, and back to the postseason last year, it was also very strong for him. It showed the style of soccer that he's more comfortable playing. But then, this preseason, he's already scored, I think, 2 goals, and then he's got 2 other ones that were offsides and marginally offside ones, but they were still solid finishes. It shows that, he's got his feet on this year. I think that there's no reason to think he couldn't put in 15, assuming he's healthy. But, if you're playing a line, I guess if I was betting over under, 11.5 is probably the one that I would be hung up on, where I don't know if I'd bet over or under. But for the sake of my argument and my love of Buxa, I'm going 15.
Yeah, maybe I wanted to be the optimist by putting 9.5, so that all of us said over. But I forgot, when you make odds, you actually want to make it difficult to decide over or under.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, MGM opened up the Revs at 16-1 to win the Eastern Conference Final, which was an absolutely ridiculous line. So it wouldn't be the first time that someone is underestimating the Revolution. Now it's time for our bold predictions. I'll start with mine, and then Chris, I'll go to yours in a second. Then Seth, you can give us ours. But my bold prediction for the season is that Gustavo Bo will end the season in a super sub role. Teal Buchanan is going to play his way into a full-time starter, and Gustavo Bo is essentially going to be the odd man out in that 4-2-3-1 formation, and he kind of comes on as a 30-minute man to come on and get a goal. So that's my bold prediction. I'm also going to say, if the Revolution disappoint this year, this is a spicy one. If the Revolution disappoint, Matt Turner will be loaned to a Premier League team over the summer on a 6-month loan. If the Revolution season goes haywire and they fall to 9th place by June, I think a Premier League team comes in, offers them a pretty decent loan fee, and Matt Turner gets his European experience, because he wants to go over there and play there, but the Revolution keeps signing him to contract extensions, so he seems to want to stay. So I think the Revs, if the season kind of goes haywire and they don't seem to be in the running for MLS Cup, I think they let Matt Turner go over, boost his stock, and see where that goes. So, Chris, your bold predictions.
The Revs have always wanted one thing, right? And it's some hardware. And my prediction is that we are actually going to get some much alluded hardware. That's right. The 2021 U.S. Open Cup is what the Revs are going to be winning this year. And we're going to find out really soon whether or not we even have a chance. I don't see any reason why they don't qualify for the tournament. And then what year has the tournament ever been more primed for the Revolution to make a run? So all they have to do is qualify. And once they qualify, I see no reason that they cannot win this, and actually put an Open Cup trophy in their cabinet. And you want to go for a second prediction? I was going to say Brandon Bai is going to be MLS Best 11 right back.
Ooh, that's a spicy one. I just want all of our listeners to tweet at Chris in case the Revs don't make the qualification for the Open Cup. The second that happens, everyone tweet at Chris and tell him his bold prediction was terrible.
Yeah.
Seth, give me your bold predictions.
I really like the Bo one. The Bo one interests me quite a bit, because I've always kind of said that I view him a little bit as a luxury player. I think he's obviously very talented, but I think that he's someone who kind of disappears sometimes in games, and we saw that in the playoffs last year, that he doesn't necessarily play enough defense. He doesn't necessarily hold up the ball. He just kind of finds those spaces. So that's kind of a fun one. The buy one's kind of fun as well. I'll make mine that the Revolution will sign a striker during the summer transfer window. Buxa will not hit the 9.5 line, and Bruce Arena will want to upgrade there in order to make sure that he makes the playoffs and makes it run the postseason. And maybe my other bold prediction will be that Tajon Buchanan ends up playing as an attacking right back. There's been all this promise that he's a midfielder, but maybe he ends up being that guy at the end of the season that serves as the attacking right back. Although Brandon Bye's been pretty good during the preseason here. Yeah, I don't know. I'll go with those two.
I do want to add before we move on that last year's predictions, you nailed it, Seth. You said the Revs will sign a starter this summer, whether it be a center back or defensive midfielder. So you got that one, nailed it on the head. And then you said if it isn't bold enough, Diego gets traded during the summer window. That one did not happen, but it basically happened. Diego ended up leaving, so you get points for your bold predictions last year. I said 5 goals for Justin Renix, and that looks wrong, but I didn't specify if it would be with Revs 1 or Revs 2. So I'm also taking credit for getting my bold prediction right. I think I was one off. Other bold predictions last year, just to kind of go through them really quickly. David Civilian said Jones and Kessler will be locked in as starters by the end of the season, and Rivera will rotate as a late sub and spot starter. So I'd give him 2 for 3 on that one. I don't think there were any others that were hits. We had a lot of 30 goal, 30 assists plateaus, which I don't think we can really grade too much because, Bo, Heel, Buxa get 50 goals. Pania, Bo, Buxa, Heel, 50 goals, 50 assists. We can't really compare those since we didn't get a full season, and I don't think those were going to hit. Regardless, we did get one that was a stadium announcement before the 2021 season. That one's a no. But David wins the best bold prediction of our listeners last year with Jones and Kessler's locked in as starters by the end of the year. So I give him full points for that one. I do want one more bold prediction from you guys, and this is going to be off the top of your heads here. We didn't prep this one at all, so I want the answer. I'm coming to you first, Seth. Give me one player that will not finish with the Revolution this season. So one player that is either released or traded during the 2021 season.
Wow. Thank you for not putting that on the prep sheet at all and just saying I'm going straight to you. It would have been nice maybe to say the question and then say my name. So I had a little bit of time to kind of think about it.
We can stall. Chris, give me yours.
I'm panicking too. Gosh, I don't know.
All right, fine. I'll go. And it's going to be kind of ridiculous for me to say it because I just said that he's going to be the wing back, the right wing back. But I don't know. Tajon Buchanan. I think if someone makes a legitimate offer for Tajon Buchanan, I think the Revs should say yes. Because if Traustason truly is the midfielder that should be there, then where's Buchanan's spot? And if you can get good money for him, like versus I think Matt Turner, you can't sell Matt Turner. I think unless it's an absurd, like ridiculously absurd amount of money, you really can't sell him because he's a game-changing player. Buchanan, it's hard to know if he's definitely going to be a starter in MLS this season, next season. So I think that's one. I think maybe Scott Caldwell. He's similar to the position that Diego was in last year. Like, where exactly is his role? And if someone really kind of sees him as someone who can kind of fill in some minutes, maybe you trade him as a MLS veteran who can like plug in some spots. And maybe a DeJuan Jones if Mafla ends up being someone who's definitely a starter, then I think a lot of teams will want DeJuan Jones. I even heard at one point David Goss saying that he thought DeJuan Jones could get called up to the U.S. men's national team this summer, which I thought was a pretty bold prediction. So there are people that rank DeJuan Jones. I think the problem with all of those predictions is that you want depth on this team if you're going to be a championship winning team. So the idea of getting rid of Tajon, then all of a sudden your depth drops a little bit. If you get rid of Jones, your depth drops a little bit. I think Caldwell is a pretty safe bet that like it doesn't really bother you as much, or Casado, the same type of thing. If he's on the outside looking in, then maybe you can trade someone like that. I mean, you think of like a Wilfred Zahibo last year. He gets traded and at first we're like, that's a big guy that you're going to be missing. But like he didn't really do anything in Houston, and he ends up playing for a lower tier team over in Europe. So I think that maybe that defensive midfield position is somewhere that the most likely trade is going to happen, unless something comes in that's pretty sizable. If someone really comes in with a DeJuan Jones offer or really comes in with a Buchanan offer, maybe you have to say yes.
Yeah, I got to say the obvious answer I think has to be Tajon, because that's where all the rumors are right now. But then my first instinct went straight to DeJuan Jones, but I couldn't pull the trigger and say his name because I don't think that it would actually happen. I mean, he is too valuable right now to the Revolution, providing so much versatility and depth. And so I took a second to think about it, but I settled on Brad Knighton. There's got to be a team out there that's going to be looking for a keeper late on. The Revs have Joe Rice coming up from Revs 2, possibly. He looks like a very solid keeper. We're going to have to think about a Turner replacement. But, we also have Earl Edwards Jr. now that was just brought in. I could see Brad Knighton being expendable and going somewhere when some team has an injury or something like that. Someone needs a goalkeeper. Knighton might be the option to go.
The one name I'll add, although you mentioned it in passing, Seth, I think Luis Caicedo might be the Wilfred Zahibo of this season. Luis Caicedo coming off of injury, he might get limited minutes here and there. He might look really, really well, but he takes an international roster spot. There's a lot of depth in that central midfield role. I think Scott Caldwell is a good shout too. The thing I lean Caicedo over Scott Caldwell is, one, the international spot, and two, Scott Caldwell is on the supplemental roster, not the senior roster. I don't think that really plays too much of an impact on it here, but I just think Luis Caicedo being younger, he might have a little bit more of a higher stock, and if the Revs need to bring in an international signing during the season, I think that might be the way they end up going and getting rid of that international spot. But good answers. I intentionally sprung that on you because I wanted the answer off the top of your head. Really, really good stuff from you guys. And DeJuan Jones too. Actually, I do want to say too, I want to add on to your point, Seth, about MLS pundits really rate DeJuan Jones very highly. Joe Lowry of the MLS Assist podcast, they were building their best 11 Eastern Conference and Western Conference formations and stuff like that last year, and he added DeJuan Jones at left back, and DeJuan Jones wasn't even starting for him. He thinks he's going to be a really good wing back. DeJuan Jones is a hell of an athlete. I think a lot of people think he is a starting wing back in this league, and the Revs, for whatever reason, don't seem to do that. So if they are able to get a pretty good offer and get a decent amount of allocation money or something like that, and Mafla's working out. If Mafla looks like you're starting left back, I do think DeJuan Jones is a little bit expendable because I think some other team will rate him higher than Bruce Arena.
He has a lot of speed. I asked him a question on social media last year, Andrew Farrell, and I asked him who the fastest player was on the team, and he was really quick to answer with DeJuan Jones.
And we asked him last year. We had him on the podcast last year. And we asked him if he had ever had a faster teammate, and he said no. He said there was one guy in high school that might be faster. But let's move on to some listener questions real quickly. TSB11 says, how many minutes for the young homegrowns will go to Kiza, Bell, Maciel, Rivera, Verfuth, and Renix? It's also should be noted that TSB11 asked us last year if over under 150 minutes for the young homegrowns. And I think Seth, you and I both said they were going to go way over, and they ended up getting 29 minutes. So I'll kind of combine them all together and say, how many minutes do you expect these players to get? And maybe point out one or two that you think is going to get the most out of them. So Chris, who out of these young homegrowns do you think will get the most minutes? And how many minutes total you think they'll get?
I don't think there's a lot of minutes necessarily for a lot of the younger guys. There's so much depth right now with MLS veterans, international players, new signings that I can't see where any minutes are really going to be available.
So you think these are all pretty much spare parts, essentially? You don't see anyone breaking through?
Not this year, no. I think there's too much, to the point that Seth made earlier, where, I guess you made it as well, Greg, that the time is now and maybe next year to go win a cup. And, for that reason, Bruce brought in all these experienced players. He's brought in some young guys as well, but unless there's any injuries or anything like that, I can't see any minutes really going to any new homegrowns.
Well, Seth, I'll go to you. we talked about Bell and Maciel a little bit and the roles they might carve out on their team. Do you see any of the four that I listed, Kiza, Rivera, Verfuth, Renix, do you think any of them is going to be breaking into the team this year?
No, I think that the two you mentioned, I think Bell could be someone who's a spot starter. Or the other thing that you could see happen is Bruce Arena really liked to go to the three center backs late in games if he was winning last year. And you saw that that role was filled by Mancien. And he actually did pretty decent as a ball winner, like trying to win those head balls. And I think that Bell can be that individual. Again, it's going to be so hard to get in that game day 18 because you imagine that that one of those spots is DeJuan Jones if Mafla's starting, and the other one's probably going to be AJ De La Garza. So those are already two defenders plus the goalkeeper. Now you're at 14, and I imagine the last four players are going to be more attacking oriented. So it'd be really hard for Bell to get into that game day 18. He'd have to beat out De La Garza or one of those outside back positions, which he totally could because he himself is a natural left back. And then Maciel could be someone that's more a calming presence. Maybe he ends up in a starting 11 type situation. Renix, I think it's going to be really tough for him. I think that his chance was last year to really kind of show that he should be with the first team. I think right now he has to go prove it with the second team. Rivera, I like Rivera. He has a goal against in the preseason against LA Galaxy 2. Is that correct? Or was it the LA Galaxy first team?
LA Galaxy 2. Yeah, last Wednesday.
But again, it's just going to be hard for him to break in. Verfuth, I think, had his opportunity to kind of prove that he was the guy, and he didn't really look that sharp in the preseason game. So I think he dropped down the depth chart. And Kiza, I think it goes Buxa. I think it goes Bunbury. And then I think that you're probably better off trying to get that guy minutes down at Revs 2, or maybe you find a championship team to loan him to if you want a little bit higher of competition. So there's just too many more experienced guys to make up the 18 to see any of those guys definitely breaking through every single week.
We did get another question from Mike Kennedy. Does Buxa hit 10 plus goals this year? I think we all kind of took the over on your 9.5 there, Seth. So we unfortunately already asked that one. Apology for not picking up on that question a little bit sooner. But Rally Revs fan asks us, who leads the team in goals this season? I'll start with that one. Seth, is the answer Buxa, or do you have a dark horse?
Oh, man, I mean, you hope it's Buxa, right? I mean, he seems like the guy who has to be leading the front line. I think similar to we were talking back in the day about, Juan Fernando Casado, you want your striker to be on form if you're going to be a good team. So you hope that he has the most. Carlos Gil is an interesting guy because he takes PKs. So obviously his numbers will increase. So if Buxa's not necessarily the sharpest, he'll be there. And then Bo's obviously a guy who can score quite a bit if he's in form and if everyone's kind of allowing him to have space. I think that the safe, I'm going to go with Carlos Gil just because, I've been criticizing Buxa throughout the podcast. So for me to then pick him to also be the lead scorer, I just feel like I'm just like, kind of all over the place. I think that Buxa could do it. I think he hopefully should do it if the Revs are going to be a contender in the East, but I'll go with Carlos Gil just because he's very good and he takes the PKs.
Chris, let's hear you stand for Buxa. Go.
It's Adam Buxa. It has to be. I mean, I guess it doesn't have to be. I mean, last year it was Teal Bunbury, and if we're having Teal Bunbury, any other like second tier winger on the team, not that Bunbury is a second tier player, but in the depth chart, we're going to be in a lot of trouble again. But no, I already said it. I think Buxa, the over under should sit somewhere around 15 that's where the expectations lie for me, at least. And if anyone else is getting more than 15, then we're going to have a really good year.
I think Bo might be in the running a little bit just because he might be a little bit more free with Gil and Buxa on the field. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be shocked to see Bo get to 10 or 12 and kind of challenge Buxa, but I don't know. It's a tough one. I could see either of them scoring 15, and I could see either of them getting 6. So
I do think there's a chance that we have 3 10 goal scorers this year.
Very possible. Raleigh Revs fan also says, where and how does this team use Tayon Buchanan? Chris, I'll go to you real quickly. How do you think they're going to use him?
Depth, unfortunately. I think he provides so much to the team, and he is such a spark. But I go back to I don't know where you're going to put him. So we were talking about where we're going to put the homegrown players. I don't know where to put Tayon Buchanan. he deserves a starting spot somewhere. I just don't know where it is. I mean, we brought in Traustason. Maybe he's not panning out. Maybe we they throw Tejan over on left wing. Um, Maybe Brandon Baez is not doing great at right back, but we know Bruce Arena is not planning to play Tejan at right back. He wants him to be an attacking presence. I'd say he's going to be more of a super sub this year.
No, I mean that sounds pretty spot on to me. I think it is interesting to think about week one. Traustason is obviously someone who has to quarantine and maybe get up to speed with the team. So maybe that's Buchanan's chance to kind of start for a little bit or claim some minutes there. It would be interesting to see if the team goes with Bunbury as the left midfielder over Buchanan. I think that would speak a lot about Buchanan's role with the team. But at the very least, he's a guy who's going to provide a lot of energy off the bench. I would not want to be, the guy draws fouls, right? I would not want to be a defender late in the game and seeing Tejan Buchanan come at you as a left or right midfielder or even an attacking right back if they're really trying to push a ton of numbers forward. So I think that's his role right now. But, he's obviously talented, and it'll be interesting to see if other teams try to trade for him.
And they got Emma Boateng as well. So it's a crowded field there as well.
Well, let's move on to this real quickly because we did get a question on Twitter. Who do you think starts at left wing / left midfield next weekend? Seth, is that your prediction? You think Teal Bunbury gets the start there?
Sure, I'll go with Bunbury. I think that his pressing style, his experience might give him the edge over Buchanan. Buchanan comes off the bench, and maybe Boateng. I like Chris mentioning Boateng being another option that can come off the bench. I'll go with Teal Bunbury as the starting left midfielder for week one, although I can imagine Buchanan getting the start there as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to be different. I'm going to say Boateng gets it. He provides a different element that a lot of the other, wingers on the Revolution roster don't necessarily have. He has pieces from what everyone else has. He has a lot of speed. He has a lot of pace. He has tenacity. It's much like a younger Teal Bunbury. And he's got a real ability to cross the ball sometimes. So I would like to see Emma Boateng out there.
We did get a question as I'm reading these questions by Napkin Art on Twitter. Asked the left wing, left midfield question. He also asked us which 2020 Revs 2 player will get the most team minutes in 2021, and his bold prediction was that Maciel gets over 1,000 minutes with the first team this season. We already touched on the minutes question. It's between Bell and Maciel, I would say. I think Maciel gets the nod for most team minutes. I wouldn't go up to 1,000 though. I'd probably put it around 270. I'd say maybe three full games, 300 minutes around there. That's what I think his role is going to be. And as I say, I think he's going to might be eating up minutes earlier in the season when there are some injuries and some players getting caught up to speed. But moving on, TSB11 says, who is getting left out of the starting 11? My guess is we kind of feel like Tejan Buchanan might be the odd man out because he is this kind of unique piece. Is that kind of what we're feeling all the way around? You both predicted someone else will be starting at left wing, so I imagine Tejan Buchanan is going to be the odd piece out of the starting lineup. Is that what's about right, Chris? Yeah.
Yep. That's yes.
Yeses all the way around.
Yep.
All right, moving on. Randy LH, what is our biggest strength or weakness that not everyone is already talking about? Seth, I'll go to you. What should we be talking about?
So obviously, just real quick, Turner's a strength, Heel's a strength. Those are all the obvious ones. I think that the wingbacks are the strength that probably people don't talk about enough. That Brandon Baez on his best day, when he's getting forward because Carlos Heel came in, he's able to hit that early ball in, and that's really dangerous. I think on the left-hand side, Mafla could possibly be that individual. And if not, Dwan Jones is really quick getting up forward and getting numbers in those spots. So I think that that's a strength. And I think that, hopefully Kessler has another solid year because the way he reads the game is pretty impressive. And I think that that's a strength to think about, like that back line, who was absolutely dreadful under Brad Friedel, is pretty solid. And they had some pretty long stretches last year where they were showing that. I think that's a really big question. If Kessler can continue his progression, because that's huge. And if he can't, then the depth really comes into question there. So I think right now we can label it as a strength, but you do want to wonder if there's going to be some sort of sophomore slump when it comes to them. I don't think so, but it's possible.
Yeah, if you want to look at weaknesses, what I'm thinking is passing. I was saying it when I was watching the preseason matches so far. All I've been wanting to see is passing, because I feel like that's something, passing and possession. That's something that the Revolution have struggled with over the years a lot. They can string together maybe 2 or 3 real good passes, but then it always seems to fizzle out. They can't seem to maintain possession while still passing it around and creating runs and creating opportunities for other players. And now they're going to be bringing in a lot of new players, potentially. I think there's been 5 or 6 new additions to the first team this year that all might be seeing first team minutes. So it's going to be a lot of new chemistry to develop. And we still need to make sure that we're getting the passes on point. Hopefully with Carles Heel back, we don't have to worry about that as much. Just get the ball in his feet and let him dance around. But that's been one of the things that I've always been looking for is what runs are we making? What passes are we making? Are we making the smart decisions? And that seems to that's an area of weakness that I don't feel necessarily has been improved upon.
Yeah, and kind of building off of that, if you want a weakness that not a lot of people are talking about, if Carlos Heel goes down, what's the answer? We didn't have an answer last year. I think it's Captum, but we don't know. So I think there is it's kind of something you can't really address, losing a best, MLS 11 player. But I think there is no heel insurance necessarily, and that's a little bit concerning. In terms of the biggest strength, one guy that I don't think we really ever talk about anymore, Teal Bunbury, scored 8 goals last year. Can play on the wing, can play striker. People are talking about him like he's an afterthought. And he's been pretty consistent over the years. He's found ways to get on the score sheet and contribute to the team. So I'm not really sure how he fits into the team's plans, but he will. He will somehow, whether it's spot starts or coming off the bench or whatever. We'll be here next year talking about Teal Bunbury somehow finding a way to score 7 or 8 goals. So I think Teal Bunbury deserves a shout for consistently kind of finding his way into the Revolution's plans, and I'm not sure how he will, but he will. Chandler Hutchinson says, what is Captum's ceiling in this midfield, and who would be the best midfield partners for him? We talked about the midfield partners a little bit in the podcast. So, Chris, I'm going to go to you about Captum's ceiling and what you're expecting.
Yeah, a ceiling is it's so hard to really say what a ceiling could be, because all we've really seen is some clips of what he's done over in Spain. So I'm not sure if I can really answer that, because we don't really know how good he can be. I don't expect him to be a DP level player, but I think maybe if you want me to just create some sort of scenario, I would say he'd be a TAM level player, sort of production out of him, controlling the midfields. But you were going to say something, sorry.
I was going to say, you think he's going to fill in kind of an 8 role? Do you think he'll be able to fill in that spot consistently? He'll be the starting central midfielder by the end of the year. You give him that? Yeah,
I think he could do that, and maybe a little bit more, make a name for himself around MLS. That's probably his ceiling. And then, his partner, I think it has to be Polster. 2 separate playing styles. Captum is a really small guy. I'm really big on putting height on your team. Especially with a lot of aerial duels going on, and Polster is a physical guy, whereas Captum is more of the tiki-taka, I'm going to beat you with skill type of guy. Polster's a bigger presence, and you need that. So I see Polster as a 6, Captum as an 8.
Seth, what is Captum's ceiling in your opinion?
Yeah, that's what I see it as. I think that Captum is brought in to be that technical guy that can distribute the ball, that can win tackles. It's so hard to know when we haven't seen him at all. So I think you have to leave it as a high ceiling and hope that he probably pairs with a Polster, and that ends up being a pretty strong defensive midfielder pairing. But having not seen him play an MLS preseason game, it's hard for me to say for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, without even any preseason games, we're kind of going in blind. So hopefully Captum kind of fills in that 8 spot. But we'll see. Time will tell. One more question here, Robert Chevalier. Sorry. Will Henry Kessler get a date with the Revs model? For those of you not on Twitter, the Revs released some new material, some merch. And Henry Kessler commented, I think on Instagram, asking for the model's Instagram handle, and found it and started following her. So this was actually going to be my bold prediction that yes, he does get a date, and they're official by the end of the season. But alas, Robert ruined that turn for me. So Chris, how do you feel about Kessler scoring a date with this girl?
I think he's got good chances, man. Oh my gosh, I only grazed through the questions. I want them to be a little bit green. I didn't even see this one when I was looking through the list, so this caught me totally off guard. That's so funny.
Seth, how you feeling about our boy Henry?
Dude, King Cass, I love it. I'm all about it. He could rival Matt Turner and his girlfriend as the power couple at Foxborough. So
Matt Polster's got that too. They got the YouTube.
They could all go on triple dates.
Oh yeah, wasn't Matt Polster's girlfriend featured in the Irish tabloids or something like that?
His wife,
Scottish.
Yeah.
Scottish.
Matt Polster, Revolution Recap guest, so I don't want to talk about his wife too much, but yes, she was in the English tabloids a fair amount. But yeah, they could all go on triple dates. Very excited for Henry. Henry's a very confident man, and girls like confidence. At least that's what I'm told. So, I'm all in. I'm rooting for him. I think, and if it doesn't work out, the Revolution should do like The Bachelor with Henry Kessler, where the Revs fans, they could make a whole like social media thing. You know what I mean? I think we need to get Henry a girlfriend by the end of the season.
Is he going to hand out a ball every time?
Instead of a rose, you mean? Yes. Just because he's a defender doesn't mean he can't shoot a shot, you know?
That's right.
Other news before we wrap up here today, Jeff Laurentowicz retired, former Revolution player, 2-time MLS Cup winner, Superliga winner, obviously very, very accomplished. And I was actually thinking the other day, it would be really fun to interview Jeff Laurentowicz. It would be very, very nice. And so I want to kind of play a game with our listeners that if you have like a question that you've ever wanted to ask Jeff Laurentowicz, you should email us at revolutionrecap@gmail.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at Revolution Recap. Just send us your hypothetical questions for Jeff Laurentowicz by, say, noon on Monday, and just to see what type of questions you would have for Jeff Laurentowicz. That's just a little fun game that, if we ever did interview Jeff Laurentowicz, say, I don't know, like next Monday afternoon, we could ask him that. So again, revolutionrecap@gmail.com or DM us at Revolution Recap. Just a fun little game. Just I kind of thought about off the top of my head, but
yeah, if that ever happens, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be very cool if that hypothetically happened. Yeah. Other news: the Revolution moving to CBS Boston, no longer on MSN and
NBCSN.
Thank you, saving me. Hopefully, we get a post game show on CBS, but I'm not holding my breath. Also, for those of you in Maine, I'm sorry, you're joining ESPN Plus like the rest of us out of towners. So. Trostin has received his visa. As we said, he'll be in the U.S. this weekend. He will be quarantining for 7 days, so he might be available for the home opener, but that is unknown. And then the Revs 2 season is starting tomorrow. That is Saturday, the 10th. And also Sean O'Hearn, left back out of Georgetown, who was drafted by Minnesota United, seems to be back with Revolution 2. So not sure if he'll be playing tomorrow night, but he is back with the team. It doesn't seem like he has reached an agreement with Minnesota, so he'll be a big addition to the USL side. Final thoughts. Seth, anything you want to shout-outs or anything you wanted to talk about before we leave today?
Yeah, just say something about Jeff Laurentowicz. First of all, what a fun little game you guys have going on. I would love to just see what comes of that game.
I would love to see a lot of questions. I'll let you know. If you have any questions, you can also email us at revolutionrecap@gmail.com. Just saying.
I email you every week, but I'll definitely ask a question this week. I think that Jeff Laurentowicz, just one thing I used to love about him is just that when he would take free kicks and he would just nail that ball. It'd be like this low, hard-driven ball, and it was just really old school and always kind of fun to see him take those free kicks. Besides that, I look forward to the Revolution season. Life gets busy, so I'm not writing quite as much. But the Ben Musket, Sam Minton's doing a really good job as the site manager. There's lots of guys over there that are writing, and I'll kind of pop up here or there. But certainly I'll be on Twitter and trying to interact with individuals. I'm really, really glad that Carl Sutherland was able to join the podcast today. I know he's really shy, so he didn't really feel like sharing his thoughts. But hopefully next week he's willing to kind of jump in and have a few thoughts. Maybe he'll join the interview with Jeff Laurentowicz if it were to happen. But thank you, Carl, for being part of the podcast today.
Yeah, I didn't introduce him because I didn't want to embarrass him, but he is here. He's actually chatting. If you heard some noises, like some notifications, that I had to mute him earlier, but he had a lot of thoughts about Maciel on the first team, but he just didn't want to say it out loud on the podcast. But thank you, Carl, for being here. Chris, any final thoughts before we wrap up today?
No, not a whole lot. I mean, look, we got actual soccer competitive matches coming up, and that's just I'm buzzing because it's been far too long, and we'll actually have some stuff to talk about. We could start doing these podcasts a bit more regularly, and as much as I love doing the player interviews, I love getting to talk to them. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about real matches.
And one thing, too, I want to just talk about Jeff Laurentowicz is that he was one player that I thought would play forever. It's like Jeff Laurentowicz, Tom Brady, like Bartolo Colon, Jaromir Jagr. Like, he was in that, like, class of players that just in my mind was going to play for the next 50 years. And I guess he's not that old. I think he's 38 or something like that.
37.
But, it's just another sign I'm getting old and, time is passing me by. It's just kind of, that's one of those names that I just think you never really expected to see retire, but obviously a very, very accomplished career, and fingers crossed that maybe someday we can get him on the podcast. Maybe. Yep. Who knows? Guys, what's your Twitter handles? Seth, did you give your Twitter handle already, Seth? I forget.
At SethMan31.
And follow the Bent Musket at the Bent Musket. Chris, where can people find you online?
Yeah, find me Revs Revolt. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I think I'm on TikTok or something too. It's all at Revs Revolt. And then if you just want to find me personally, I'm at Chris Valukas on Twitter, KrisValukis.
And you can follow us at Revolution Recap on Twitter. And please also like our Revolution Recap Facebook page. You can also send us an email at revolutionrecap at gmail.com at any questions with your questions or comments, potentially for Jeff Laurentowicz by Monday at noon, who knows. And if you have not already, please rate and review our podcast on iTunes or wherever you are listening. We will be back next weekend to discuss the season opener against the Chicago Fire. Although, again, you never know. We might have, like an interview or something, like, say, Monday night or Tuesday morning. Either way, we'll be back. Thank you for listening, and go Revs.